Welcome back to the Unrevealed Realities, the place where hidden truths, unheard voices, and silent journeys find a space to breathe. In Secret Chapters, we enter those corners of life where fear and hope walk side by side, where memory becomes a compass, and where every step tells a story the world rarely hears. Tonight, we unfold a journey of escape, survival, and the search for a new beginning, a journey that mirrors thousands of lives across the world. It began on a night so quiet that even the wind felt as if it were holding its breath. The clock struck 1:12 a.m., and a dull hum vibrated through the distant valleys. In the small settlement of Norabad, nestled between rolling hills and dried riverbeds, people were beginning to sense the tremors of change, the kind that arrives like a whisper but grows into a storm. Abdullah sat on the edge of his roof, staring at the sky that had begun to lose its stars, one by one, as if something unseen were swallowing their light. His younger sister Maryam was curled up beside their mother in the dimly lit living room, unaware of the storm gently tapping at the horizon. Abdullah didn't know that in the next few hours, everything he had ever called home would shift beneath his feet. All he knew was that the air smelled different, a quiet warning that nights never lie. He stood up slowly, brushing dust off his hands, unaware that dust would soon become the language of his entire journey. The silence broke when a single, distant rumble echoed across the hills, subtle but unmistakable. His heart tightened. He rushed inside and whispered to his mother, "We need to be ready." She didn't ask why. She simply nodded, because mothers can read fear before it is spoken. By 2:03 a.m., the settlement was awake, not with noise, but with tension. People stepped out of their homes, looking toward the horizon where a faint orange glow had begun rising slowly like an unwanted sunrise. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far enough. Abdullah grabbed the small cloth bag where he had packed only necessities, 2 change of clothes, a water flask, a torn photograph of his father, and a small notebook where he had written dreams he once believed he would achieve without ever leaving home. Dreams have a strange way of traveling with us, even when nothing else does. Maryam blinked awake, rubbing her eyes, unaware of the urgency until she saw the expression on her brother's face. She clutched her small stuffed goat, the only toy she had left, and asked in a trembling voice, "Are we going somewhere?" Abdullah swallowed the truth and simply nodded. Their mother covered Maryam with her shawl and tightened her grip on her children. Outside, shadows began to move quickly as neighbors gathered in clusters, trying to understand what was coming. At 2:47 a.m., the glow on the horizon grew brighter, and the distant rumble turned into a low, continuous vibration beneath the ground. The elders whispered to each other, trying to assess whether to stay or leave. Decisions made in fear are rarely logical, but sometimes they are the only reason people survive. Abdullah noticed that the air had changed again, heavier, like the sky was lowering itself onto their backs. A moment came when people stopped debating and simply moved. And with that, Norabad began its silent evacuation. Abdullah picked up Maryam and held her with both arms, her small hands clinging tightly around his neck. His mother followed closely, her steps shaky but unwavering. They headed toward the northern road, the only path that wasn't blocked by the hills. Along that road, dozens of other families walked swiftly, carrying what little they could. A blanket, some clothes, a child half asleep. The night wrapped them in a cold that felt sharper than usual, the kind that settles into bones and remains there for years. The road narrowed as they reached the first bend. Abdullah could hear children crying, adults whispering, footsteps scraping the earth, and the wind tugging at loose fabric. When they reached an open field, the orange glow behind them had become a flickering reminder that time was running out. Maryam buried her face in Abdullah's shoulder. "Don't look back," he whispered to her, though he himself couldn't stop glancing over his shoulder. Home, once a place of comfort, was now a silhouette dissolving into uncertainty. By 3:30 a.m., the families reached an abandoned outpost, where a single, battered truck stood parked beside a crumbling wall. Its driver, a man with weathered features and tired eyes, stood outside assessing the crowd. He told them he could take some of them as far as the river crossing, but not all. Tension rose instantly. No one wanted to be left behind. Abdullah didn't push or shout. He simply stepped forward and explained he had his mother and sister with him. The driver nodded slowly, scanning the group for the most vulnerable, and began calling out names and numbers of people he could fit. Abdullah's mother squeezed his arm when their turn came. They climbed into the truck, squeezing between strangers who looked equally scared. The truck rattled to life, coughing out smoke as if it were waking up from years of sleep. As it began moving, the cold air whipped through the open sides, chilling everyone inside. Maryam clung to Abdullah's coat, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. The truck jolted along the uneven road, small stones and dust hitting its metal frame. Darkness faded slowly, giving way to a dull gray morning sky. At 4:28 a.m., they began descending into the valley that led to the river, a wide, slow-moving stretch of water that marked the edge of their district. The river wasn't deep, but its width made it difficult to cross without proper boats. When the truck finally halted near the bank, families climbed out, gathering tightly as they stared at the river flowing quietly, unaware of the desperation around it. A group of volunteers, locals who had been helping displaced families for months, stood waiting with makeshift wooden rafts. They were simple frames tied with thick ropes and metal barrels for buoyancy. The volunteers assured the families they had crossed worse rivers before, that everything would be fine, though their uncertain eyes told a different story. Abdullah helped his mother onto one of the rafts, securing Maryam between them. The raft dipped slightly under their combined weight but steadied after a moment. As they began drifting across the water, Abdullah stared at the sky, now painted with early morning blues and faint hints of gold. He had always imagined sunrises to be peaceful, but this one felt like a warning wrapped in beauty. The raft swayed gently, each movement reminding him how fragile their journey was. Halfway across, Maryam whispered, "Are we going to a new home?" He didn't know what the answer was. He only said, "We're going somewhere safer." When they reached the opposite bank, volunteers helped pull the raft to shore. Families stepped onto the muddy edge, their clothes damp and feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. Abdullah felt a strange sense of relief mixed with fear, like stepping from one uncertainty into another. But the road ahead demanded they keep moving. By 6:02 a.m., the group gathered under a cluster of tall trees to rest briefly. Smoke from small fires curled upward as volunteers heated water for tea. People huddled together for warmth, sharing pieces of bread, murmuring about relatives left behind, about the future unknown. Abdullah sat beside his mother and Maryam, his eyes scanning the path ahead. A man named Sammy, traveling with his elderly father, sat near him and offered a piece of dried fruit. They exchanged a few words, small, gentle words that strangers trade when they are not sure if they will meet again. An hour later, the travelers resumed their journey toward the border, a dusty, uneven trail lined with thorny shrubs and broken milestones. The sun had climbed higher, warming the land yet offering little comfort. Abdullah walked with Maryam slowly, making sure her small feet didn't stumble on the rough ground. His mother walked beside them quietly, every step reminding her of the home she had left behind and the uncertainty awaiting her. As they climbed the first ridge, a sudden gust of wind carried the scent of wild grass and distant rain. They paused for breath, gazing down at the vast landscape stretching endlessly before them. From that height, the world appeared both beautiful and indifferent. Abdullah felt a strange strength forming inside him, a determination shaped not by confidence but by necessity. By 9:20 a.m., they reached a small encampment where dozens of other displaced families had gathered. The camp was nothing more than tents made of tarps, blankets, and wooden poles. Children wandered barefoot, adults waited in lines for food and water distribution, and volunteers moved from tent to tent, checking on people with tired smiles. Abdullah and his family were given a corner under a shared shelter. It wasn't much, but it was enough to sit, breathe, and regroup. Time moved slowly. The afternoon sun grew hotter, casting long shadows on the ground. Abdullah helped distribute water when volunteers asked for extra hands. He carried containers, helped elderly people, and tried to ease the burden of those around him. He had always believed that helping others wasn't only a responsibility but a way to stay human in times when humanity is tested. Maryam sat beside their mother, drawing patterns in the dirt with a small stick. She hummed softly, her voice carrying the innocence of someone who still believed the world could be gentle. Abdullah watched her and felt a deep ache inside, an ache made of love, worry, and determination. By evening, the camp buzzed with activity. A distant announcement echoed. A convoy would arrive soon to take families closer to the border checkpoint. People hurried to gather their belongings, their eyes filled with urgency. Abdullah held tightly to his mother's hand, guiding her through the crowd. When the trucks arrived, lifeless, box-like vehicles coated in dust, families climbed into them, packing themselves closely together. The journey continued through the night. Darkness pressed against the windows, and the only sound was the soft rumble of the engine. People dozed off, leaning against one another, finding comfort in shared stillness. Abdullah stayed awake, watching the landscape pass in blurred silhouettes. At 1:50 a.m., the truck stopped near the checkpoint, a temporary border outpost run by a coalition of aid groups and local authorities. Families were guided into lines for registration, medical checks, and basic supplies. Bright floodlights illuminated the area, creating sharp contrasts of light and shadow. Abdullah felt overwhelmed by the noise, the movement, the sheer number of people seeking safe passage. His mother underwent a health check, and Maryam was given a warm blanket. Volunteers offered food, rice, lentils, bread, and hot tea. Abdullah accepted gratefully, though his mind remained restless. They were safe for the moment, but safety in displacement is like a flicker, visible but easy to lose. It took hours before their group was called for processing. The officials asked routine questions: names, ages, hometown, relatives, reason for displacement. Abdullah answered calmly, holding his documents tightly. One officer, noticing the exhaustion on their faces, guided them toward the shelter zone where they could rest until the next transport. By dawn, the sky lightened again. Abdullah sat at the edge of the shelter, watching the horizon brighten with muted colors. This sunrise felt different, not threatening, not hopeful, but somewhere in between. Transitions often feel like that, suspended between loss and possibility. The next transport would take them to a larger refugee settlement several kilometers away, a place where displaced families received longer-term support, education, healthcare, and paths toward resettlement. The journey there took most of the day, bouncing along rugged tracks, passing hills and abandoned fields. When they arrived, Abdullah felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. Rows of structured tents, water tanks, medical centers, children's spaces, and food distribution lines filled the landscape. This was no permanent home, but it was a place where life could breathe again. Months passed. Maryam joined the learning center, where she studied basic subjects and learned to paint. Her drawings began filling the walls of their tent, scenes of mountains, rivers, and skies with birds soaring high. Their mother volunteered in the community kitchen, cooking meals for families. Abdullah joined the logistics team, helping with supplies and transport. He became known for his steady hands, calm voice, and ability to comfort people who had lost more than they could express. He met people from different regions, each carrying their own story, stories of floods washing away entire towns, of storms tearing through homes, of conflict disrupting generational peace. Every story was different, yet every story shared a common thread: the search for safety, dignity, and a new beginning. Abdullah never forgot Norabad, but over time, the ache became a quiet echo rather than a storm. He realized that sometimes home isn't a place, but a journey, made of people who walk beside you, hold you up when you falter, and remind you that hope, even fragile, matters. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with gold and lavender, Abdullah sat outside their tent watching Maryam play with other children. Their mother brought him tea and sat beside him. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said, "We survived because we moved forward. And we will rebuild because we are together." The wind carried her words across the camp, weaving them into the quiet noises of laughter, conversation, and distant footsteps. Abdullah felt something shift inside him, a sense of belonging, of purpose. Even in the most uncertain places, new stories begin. And this was theirs. Thank you for watching. If this journey moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories on the unrevealed realities.